do to start is just state your name and your rank,
Yeah.
and then uh, the place you were born and the
Mm-hmm.
date of your
Well,
birth.
well, are you ready?
Yep.
Uh, Now, let me start now. Yeah, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Florence Pecora, and originally I'm from Woburn, Massachusetts, which is about 10 miles north of Boston. And my parents came over from Italy. My mother came over in about 1909. My father came over about 1907. And so we were um, just from Italian descent.
And where were you born?
In Woburn, Massachusetts,
And,
10 miles north of Boston,
and what year were you born?
1915, May 1915.
And what branch of the military were you in?
Well, I was going to Boston University in evening classes to increase my credits for a degree, and I met two Army nurses in 1938 and 39 that had been stationed in Hawaii, and I got to know them intimately, and I thought this was a very interesting career. So in 1939, I contacted the Army base. Well, I never moved myself until about 1941, and not enlisted, but I became an Army nurse in July of 1941.
And you retired
In July of 1968, or June of 68.
What was your childhood education?
Well, at that time, I went to we didn't have kindergarten, but I went to school at our local public schools, which had very basic, the old schools. This was about 1920, I would say, 21. And we had two classes in each room, our little old schools down in Woburn. And then I went to Woburn High, which was our little school I graduated from Woburn High in 1933 and decided to go into nurses training.
Why did you decide nurses training?
Well, I was trying to think of something I was interested in, and I thought nursing would be a good field. And so I went into to nursing. We had a little hospital at our little town, which is now, the hospital is closed.
Was there anybody that was a major influence in your life?
No, not really. It was a case of financial, because this was during the Depression, and work was very critical, and you did whatever was available to you that was profitable, that you felt you could handle. And nursing was one field I felt that I could be interested in. I could get training in it and yet survive.
And how did you pay for your education?
Well, we had to supply our own uniforms, our own books, and all of our garbs and all. But we got a small stipend, they called it a stipend, of $8 a month. Then we had a 3-year course. And I trained at the Boston Floating Hospital, which was a children's hospital. And I also went to Boston City Hospital as an affiliate of our own hospital for medical courses. Our own hospital supplied the surgical technique.
Did you work at this time?
We worked all that time. We went to school at that time, and we got all of our education. And then I went back to Boston University to get my degree.
You mentioned that you worked sewing for a while?
Oh, to earn money for my uniforms, I worked in a little garment factory during that whole summer in 1933, the summer of 33, to get into so I could get my uniforms and books. And I also had done a lot of sewing. My mother had a little sewing machine, and I loved to sew on it. I still have that old machine.
And What was the reaction of your parents when you said you were going to join the Army?
Mom, my mother was a little bit apprehensive, but she felt confident in me, and she said just to keep my morals straight and my religion straight, and she felt that whatever I did, if it was right, to behave myself. And she did not feel negative about it whatsoever.
Have you behaved yourself?
That's another chapter. I think so. I think so.
After you enlisted in the Army.
It's not enlisting in the Army. We were commissioned.
Oh, you were commissioned.
As a second lieutenant.
Oh, okay.
Now that's another story. At the time I went into the Army, the Navy and the Army were the only areas that had women in them. We were not officially enlisted. We were not officially officers. We were a brand in between. We were, our salary was not the same as a second lieutenant, but we were classed as a second lieutenant. The Navy nurses were likewise. Our salary was a little bit below the second lieutenant, but higher than the enlisted.
Okay. What happened next after?
Then when the war was declared in December of 41, I was on night duty at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And our first sergeant came around at that night of December mentioning that Pearl Harbor was bombed. And that was the beginning.
What happened next?
Well, we were all just, we were in limbo. We were all astounded. We were just flabbergasted. I can't describe it. We just couldn't comprehend the situation.
Did you know at that time that you were going to be sent overseas?
No. It was too instantaneous. We had men in training, but nobody realized that what war was imminent. We didn't know anything about that. In fact, we didn't. I don't think anybody knew where Pearl Harbor was. We knew Hawaii, but I don't think our geography was that extended.
At the time before Pearl Harbor, what were your duties?
Well, at Fort Devens, I was a regular nurse there. I had orthopedic wards. I did a lot of orthopedic work. We had the CCC camp people and the WA people that as patients. We had a lot of fractures and things like that. We also had listed military men. We had the cavalry men from Fort Devens that were some of our young men were doing their 1 year duty of military.
And tell me, what was this hospital?
It was a level general hospital at Fort Devens. And then right after that, everything exploded. The tremendous rapid growth of enlistments and the military getting ready. And my own brother was called in to the Army immediately. And he was the first, next to myself, he was the next one in our family to go.
And his name?
Joseph Pecora.
And then you had other brothers and sisters?
Oh yes. I had 3 brothers and 4 brothers and my sister and myself. There were 6 of us in the service at one time out of 7 of us. There were 2 of us were in the Pacific and 2 were in Europe, and my other 2, my brother and sister, were in the United States.
Were your sisters nurses also?
My sister was in the Navy nurse. She graduated from training and went into the Navy.
And what was her name?
Mary Pecora.
What happened after Pearl Harbor, and then you knew you were going to be sent Did you know you were going to be sent to the Pacific?
No, we realized that there were a tremendous amount of people being called into the service, and different hospitals had different groups of medical people that were being called into the service, and a lot of station hospitals were being formed, and there was a tremendous amount of buildup, and the people that were being sent, some of the now I was at that time, because I had come in before the war, I was more or less of a veteran, and not really, but I was a little more familiar with the military than some of the newer people coming in about the regulations and all. And there were field hospitals being established and general hospitals, and eventually our names were added to the list of these hospitals being formed to be sent overseas.
What is the difference between a field hospital and a general hospital?
Well, at that time, a field hospital were the group that were behind the battles, the war, and general hospital was the hospital that was more in a secure area where they did the more intensive surgery. The field hospital now would be like the one that was in Korea, MASH. The MASH hospital is a step above our field hospital. MASH developed from the field hospitals. And the general hospitals were the ones that treated the long terminal care.
What about you and your friends at this time?
Well, we were encouraged to have a buddy system for security, even the enlisted men. You more or less had a buddy, a friend to go wherever you went, a buddy system. And there were a lot of people, not only two or three, but a group would be a group of buddies.
Well, your girlfriends.
Yes, Ann Connors.
In the hospital where you were.
Yeah.
Did you talk about what you were going to do, or?
Oh no, it was
any
just
rumors?
no. When we were in the Pacific, we didn't have that many rumors.
No, I mean while you were still back in the States about
Oh no,
where you were
when
going to go. Or
you didn't pick up your buddy until you got there.
Okay.
When you were received orders, you didn't know who else would be on those orders.
What were your orders?
The orders would be a directive from Washington, from telling you that you would be moved.
And when did you receive your orders?
In let me think. I went over in, what was my, in September of, or August of 1942. We were going over to the Pacific.
You received those orders.
I'm not going to give a specific day. I can't
Yeah.
remember, but it was in late 42. And we left from California on the Rochambeau. Now, I think I had it on my paper. It was we left in September and got over, and we zigzagged across the Pacific in convoy. And there were two troop ships, the Rochambeau, and I don't know what the other name of the other ship. They were packed, jammed to the hilt.
How many nurses?
Well, different nurses and medical people and soldiers, tremendous, everything.
Thousands.
And the conditions were very severe, very severe. We had 2 destroyers and I think 3 cruisers, and we zigzagged across for almost, 20 days? It was a very, the food was nil. We had no food.
And how did you get to California?
Well, we went over by troop train.
Tell me about
Troop-
that.
Well, that's another story. That was just a boring situation. You put on a kind of a laissez-faire situation, but deep in your heart you knew that you didn't know what you were getting into.
And what did you take with you?
You were allowed 1 foot locker and a suitcase.
And what did you have? Do you remember any? Did you have like a Bible?
Oh, well, we all Bible or prayer book, our own personal things. But The uniforms we were issued were some blue seersucker dresses. Now, remember, the Army was not, the women had no idea what we were going to be using in the Pacific. We went over with full wool coats, a blue wool coat. We had no uniforms. We had the blue seersucker dresses, but we didn't have any official uniform.
So she had stockings?
And we had white stockings and white shoes, but they weren't of any use on the islands. Stockings you couldn't buy.
And what was, where did you end up, in New Caledonia?
New Caledonia. The other ship that was with the Armada, they went on to Espiritu Santos. And our ship stopped at to New Caledonia, and we had troopmen on that, and there was a massive, when we got out of Numia, we went off on these dinghies that brought us into the city, a little town of New Caledonia. And New Caledonia wasn't ready for us. These were all French, they were French people that were sent over from France as for punishment. They were political They were the ones that inhabited New Caledonia.
So when you arrived in New Caledonia,
Well, they were ready for us because the Navy was there. Nimitz and Halsey, all the Navy, they had a base there. We were under the Navy base. But they were not prepared for this tremendous influx of personnel. They were not ready for, we had such a rapid build-up. It was dramatic.
So what did you do as a nurse?
Well, I did take care of some Japanese prisoners. They were very minimal, but the Japanese were still, Carl C. Ball was on, and we had a few Japanese prisoners at that time, and we were in tents. And the Japanese prisoners we had were the military, they were enlisted men, but their officers we didn't have too many of them. The Japanese did not believe in being captured. They committed harikari after they were sent back to the prison camp. There was no use in taking care of them.
But when you got off the ship in New Caledonia, what did you think?
Well, we just survived. We knew we were going to be intense.
Well, you knew that.
Yeah, we knew that. And we knew that that the conditions were dramatic. Very primitive, very primitive.
What was your tent like?
Well, you had 3 poles, or 2 poles. They were the tents from 1918, and that's another chapter. I could go on for hours on that.
Briefly describe the tent you lived in.
Well, we were up in a field off in Numia. We finally left Numia and went up towards Tontuta. The Marines were up in Tontuta. They were the Black Marauders. And they were stationed up there not too far from our fields. And of course the Australians, we were in Australia, New Caledonia had a lot of Australian people there. And the cows were roaming in the fields. And a cow came through one of the tents one night and hit one of the poles, and the tent collapsed. And that kind of set up a riot. But it was rugged. It was rugged.
How many people were in your tent?
8.
Oh, they were big tents.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They were the 1918 field tents.
And you slept on...
No, we had old field cots in the mud.
Was there a floor in the tent?
No. No such thing. We could scrounge a box or anything, we tried to find every kind of a box or anything that you could use for comfort.
Was mosquitoes bad?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. No, one thing I will say, we had dengue fever, we had mosquitoes, but we didn't have malaria in New Caledonia. That was the one island in the Pacific that had no history of malaria. That I will say, we had no malaria. We had dengue fever, and we had other diseases, but not malaria.
What about sanitary facilities?
No,
like
no, no,
toilets,
no, no.
showers?
We used the old-fashioned outpost, the Johns, 2-seaters, 4-seaters, 10. That's all.
What about showers?
Oh, you could go down the river.
Is that what you did?
Oh yes, I have some pictures of no showers. You went down the river.
Was it sectioned off for women?
You put your bathing suit on. Or you could take a basin bath.
And how long were you in New Caledonia?
I left New Caledonia in 2 years. We went to Guadalcanal from New Caledonia, about
So
2
you were there
years.
2 years, in a tent the whole time?
But,
In a tent the whole time?
no, we graduated. The beginning it was rugged. We finally ended up in Noumea at the Panettiere, which was a little school for the French people there, their children. And we established a hospital there. And we left from there to go to Guadalcanal.
Aside from the cow going through the tent, what is your most memorable experience at New Caledonia?
I don't, we had a lot of hardships. We had the river come up, flood the hospital. This was in Dumbia Valley. We had a lot of tragedies, but we had a couple of dynamite explosions from ammunition, and you don't try to remember the past too much.
As a nurse, was this your first experience to major wounds, battle wounds? Were the troops brought?
No, we did not get the in the Pacific. The Navy shipped them right back to to Hawaii. We had no prisoners, until we got into New Caledonia. Guadalcanal. We got a few people back, but not too many.
What kind of nursing care did you?
We took care of our own troops, and that was disease and that kind of thing. We had a lot of disease and malaria and accidents of our own troops.
Did you have a special field?
Yeah, well, I worked orthopedics, and then I went into administration because as more people came in, I had more experience, and then the younger nurses took over the nursing, and we did the directing.
Was that easier on you?
Not really, because you had a staff, and sometimes you didn't have people to staff. And then when we went on to Guam from Guadalcanal, and that was another chapter because that was when Japan capitulated and the atomic bomb went up. And I was on Guam at that time, and we knew that there was something very ominous when the first bomb was sent up from Tinier in Saipan and Guam. We knew that those 3 islands were the group that the planes were taken off to go up to Japan. And that's when we started to receive our own men back from Japan.
In New Caledonia, how many nurses did you supervise? Would you like a Kleenex?
I'm all right.
You went to get your Kleenex.
Oh, I
have some clearance.
yeah.
Okay. nurses did you supervise in New Caledonia? How many?
Well, the number varied because some of them became ill. We had to send them back, and we didn't get replacements. But back to Guam, we received the first group of our own enlisted men, our own men that came back. There were patients of the Japanese as prisoners. And that was the most devastating situation, to receive our own men back in such a deplorable condition. Some of them were like zombies. Some of them were drastically sick. And that whole week, right after Japan capitulated and we started to receive our men back, that was the most heartbreaking situation.
We've talked to some of those men.
Pardon?
We've talked to a couple of those men.
You have?
Yes. Yes.
And of course we were all out. We didn't have very much, but we did have some fresh fruits and things, because Guam was one of our own military, our own island. And we did have supplies, some supplies, and we all sacrificed our own meals for them. But they were a very tragic group, as they were the real sick people. Now, we didn't get too many of the ones that were able to go sent back directly. We did not receive them, but we did receive the critically ill men.
Was that the hardest part?
That was one of my hardest parts. That's it.
Can I ask you about Guadalcanal?
Well, Guadalcanal was a survival. I mean, we had to occupy the island to keep our control of the island. As we gained more territory, we had to secure all the islands, and we had to staff them so that they wouldn't be repossessed. But we still had Japanese up in the. We didn't know that if they were still up in the mountains or not. On Guam, there were still Japanese people, soldiers up in the mountains.
So you went from New Caledonia
to Guadalcanal, and then to Guam,
and then to Guam,
and then back home.
Oh, so when the war was over, you were able to get back?
Well, the surrender was in August, and we went to Guam, I think, in May of that year. As we captured more islands, we progressed up, pushing the Japs back up.
Was there, I understand boredom was a problem.
Oh yes, very much, very much. As I mentioned, we did a lot of crafts. If you wouldn't survive if you didn't keep yourself busy, you would be climbing the walls.
What were some of the crafts you did?
Oh, I did a lot of sewing and designing.
Your uniform that you came with obviously wasn't appropriate. What did you do for uniforms?
Well, they finally they sent us some brown seersuckers. We finally got some. We we took men's trousers, 3 pairs of men's largest trousers we could find, would make 2 skirts.
Did you wear trousers or did you?
No. We took the legs apart and made skirts, a 6-score skirt.
And what about shirts?
Well, we usually bought the enlisted men's or the military men's shirts, the smaller size that would fit us, and cut off the sleeves.
And what about shoes?
Oh, the shoes, our families finally sent us shoes. So we had shoes come.
So you
the
didn't have to wear.
No, but a lot of us wore wooden clogs. The natives on the islands made clogs, wooden clogs, and we wore those because there was a rubber band on a piece of wood.
Not while you were at work.
Yes. You're walking through the mud. You wouldn't. New Caledonia was all coral sand. It would tear up your shoes.
And you wore these to the
Clogs.
hospital?
We wore clogs. you, no sense in wearing, you couldn't wear stockings, you didn't, and nobody cared.